The private hospital suite looked less like a room for the dying and more like a monument to everything money could buy except love. Soft golden lights glowed against polished walls. Fresh orchids drooped in crystal vases. A silent television flashed headlines no one was watching. On the marble table, an expensive phone lay dark. No missed calls, no messages, no proof anyone in the world was trying to reach the man struggling to breathe beneath the white sheets. The only sound was the slow, sharp rhythm of the heart monitor. Arthur Vale, one of the richest men in America, stared at the ceiling with hollow eyes as the machine counted out the silence around him. Outside the half-open door, two doctors whispered. One said he'd be surprised if Arthur made it through the night. The other quietly asked if the family had been informed. A pause, then a soft answer. They know. Arthur heard every word, and still no one came. No son, no daughter, no brother, no friend, no business partner, no trembling hand reaching for his, no voice saying, "Stay with us." No footsteps racing down the hall, just flowers already dying, luxury that felt useless, and the awful stillness of a man discovering too late that wealth could fill a room, but not keep it warm. Then the door slowly opened. A little boy stepped inside by mistake. He couldn't have been older than 7. His backpack was slipping off one shoulder, his sneakers bright blue. Too cheerful for a hospital. His curly hair was messy, his face open and curious in the way only children can be. He looked over his shoulder first, clearly searching for someone, then turned and saw Arthur in the bed. He didn't see a billionaire. He didn't see a famous name. He saw someone who looked lonely. Slowly, carefully, the little boy walked toward the bed. Arthur tried to speak, but no words came. Before he could move, the boy gently reached for his trembling hand and wrapped both of his small hands around it. Then he looked straight into Arthur's eyes and asked, in the softest, most innocent voice imaginable, "Sir, are you lonely?" Arthur's lips parted, but no answer came out. Instead, tears slid silently down the sides of his face. At that exact moment, his mother rushed in. A woman in hospital housekeeping scrubs, panic written all over her. "Noah," she gasped. "Baby, no!" She hurried to the bedside, horrified. "I am so sorry, Mr. Vale. He wasn't supposed to come in here. Noah, come with me right now." She reached for the boy's arm. Arthur found just enough strength to whisper one word. "Please." The woman froze. Arthur swallowed hard and looked at her with tears still in his eyes. "Please, let him stay. He's the first person who has held my hand in months." The room went still. Her face changed from panic to confusion. Noah looked up at his mother, then back at Arthur, still holding his hand like letting go would be the cruelest thing in the world. "My mom says hospitals make people brave," Noah said. "But sometimes they get scared first." Arthur let out a weak breath that almost sounded like a laugh. She pressed a hand to her chest. Her name tag read Elena Reyes. Her eyes were tired in the deep, permanent way that came from surviving too much for too long. "Mr. Vale," she said softly, "if administration finds out my son wandered into a VIP room, I could lose my job." Arthur looked at her for a long second. "Then they won't hear it from me." Noah glanced at the heart monitor and frowned. "Does that machine tell if somebody misses you?" Arthur felt the question land somewhere deeper than his illness. "No," he whispered. It only tells them I'm still alive. Noah thought about that. That seems like only half a job. Arthur closed his eyes. Because the child was right. The machine could measure his heartbeat, but it couldn't measure what had vanished around it. The next afternoon, Noah came back. He carried a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in a napkin because he had decided rich people in hospitals probably forgot to eat real food. Elena looked like she wanted the floor to open and swallow her, but Arthur took it from him like it was the most valuable gift he had received in years. Noah sat beside the bed and began asking questions adults never would. Why was this room bigger than some apartments? Why did flowers keep coming when people didn't? Why did rich people always have serious chairs nobody relaxed in? Why was his phone so quiet? Arthur answered some with dry humor, some with silence, some with truths he had spent years avoiding. When Noah asked if he had children, Arthur turned his face toward the window. "I have a daughter," he said. Noah tilted his head. "Then where is she?" Arthur's throat tightened. "I don't know." Noah was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Lost is not the same as gone." Arthur turned back sharply. The little boy shrugged. "Sometimes grown-ups wait too long and then act like that means forever." Across the room, Elena stopped moving. Arthur didn't answer. Because a child had just said in one sentence what he had spent years refusing to admit. Arthur Vail had once been the kind of man magazines called unstoppable, self-made, visionary, ruthless. He built towers, hotels, shipping routes, and empires. He knew how to read contracts faster than faces, and numbers better than emotions. He knew how to enter a room and own it before he spoke. What he never learned was how to stay still long enough to keep the people he loved from leaving. His wife, Margaret, had loved him deeply, but even she used to say Arthur treated tenderness like a meeting he could always reschedule. When she died, something hard settled over him and never fully left. Instead of grieving, he expanded. Instead of healing, he worked. Instead of holding on to his daughter, Lily, he pushed harder, judged faster, and listened less. Lily was everything money couldn't design. Creative, emotional, stubborn. Alive in a way that made rooms brighter. She painted late into the night, laughed with her whole body, and believed love mattered more than appearances. Arthur believed appearances protected love. That difference destroyed them. When Lily fell in love with Daniel Cross, a public school music teacher with kind eyes and very little money, Arthur treated the relationship like a reckless phase. Polite at first, then cold, then openly disapproving. He said Daniel didn't belong in their world. Lily said maybe their world was the problem. Their last real argument happened in Arthur's marble foyer, while Lily stood with tears in her eyes and a bag over her shoulder. "One day," she told him, "you'll finally have everything you chased, and you'll notice nobody stayed to share it with you." Arthur told himself she was emotional, told himself she would come back, told himself time would fix what pride refused to touch. She never came back, and the years passed. But now, every time Noah walked in, Arthur felt those buried years pressing harder against his chest. Noah's visits became the only part of the day he looked forward to. He brought crayon drawings, terrible knock-knock jokes, paper airplanes, and deeply serious opinions about hospital pudding. He asked why old people always had expensive blankets but looked cold anyway. He asked if being famous felt fun or just noisy. And every time Arthur answered, something in the room softened. The nurses noticed it first. Arthur sat up longer when Noah was there. He ate more. He argued with his physical therapist instead of ignoring him. He asked for the curtains to be opened. Once, when Noah announced the soup looked like warm sadness in a bowl, Arthur laughed hard enough to trigger a coughing fit and set off 2 alarms. The whole floor talked about it. Mr. Vale had laughed. Elena noticed the changes too, but she didn't trust them at first. Life had trained her not to trust sudden gentleness, especially from powerful men. She was a single mother working multiple jobs. Bus fare, overtime, rent, groceries, school supplies, and smiling in front of Noah when she was one unpaid bill away from panic. She had seen rich men before. Generous in public, careful in private. Kind for as long as kindness cost them nothing. But Arthur didn't flirt with her, didn't pity her, didn't offer help with invisible strings attached. He only listened. He only noticed. One morning he saw Noah's sneakers were splitting at the sole. The next day, a plain box sat at the nurse's station with a new pair in the same style and size. Elena marched into Arthur's room holding the box like evidence. "I can't accept this," she said. Arthur looked at the shoes, then at Noah in the corner, trying them on with silent delight. "They're shoes," Arthur said, "not a contract." Elena folded her arms. "From men like you, it's never just shoes." Arthur was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes it's guilt." She paused. "Guilt for what?" Arthur looked at Noah. "For noticing too late what should have mattered first." That night, Elena rode 2 buses home to the tiny apartment above a laundromat in Queens. Noah did homework at the kitchen table while she lined up overdue bills in neat little piles, as if organizing them could make them smaller. The refrigerator held milk, eggs, tortillas, and hope on its last leg. When the hot water cut out again, she heated pots on the stove and turned bath time into a game called indoor camping. After Noah fell asleep, Elena pulled a dented metal box from the closet. Inside, old hospital bracelets, photographs, folded papers, and one sealed envelope with Lily's handwriting on it. She touched the name like it could still hurt her. Because it could. Years ago, Lily had met Elena at a small downtown art center where Elena cleaned evenings for extra money. Lily had treated her like she mattered. Coffee, conversations, extra pay for babysitting. Then Daniel died in a car accident, and shortly after that, Lily got sick. Fast, quietly, cruelly. Elena had been there near the end, when hospital lights made everything too honest. Lily had made her promise 2 things. Raise Noah away from greed, and only tell Arthur the truth if she was ever certain he had learned to love a person more than a legacy. Elena had kept that promise with everything she had. She had never imagined she would one day be standing inside Arthur Vale's hospital room, watching her son unknowingly hold the hand of the grandfather he had never known existed. The next week changed Arthur's room completely. It no longer felt like a waiting place for death. It felt like a room deciding whether life was still interested. One afternoon, Noah pulled an old magazine cover from a drawer. It showed Arthur 20 years younger, standing in front of a gleaming tower beneath the headline, "The Man Who Never Misses." Noah studied the picture. Then he looked at Arthur in the bed. "This version of you looks mean." Elena almost dropped the flowers she was fixing, but Arthur surprised them both by smiling. "He was," Arthur said. Noah looked back at the picture. "My teacher says people act mean when they're scared somebody might see where they hurt." Arthur's smile faded. Then Noah asked the question Arthur had spent years avoiding. "Did you say sorry to your daughter?" Arthur's jaw tightened. "No." "Why not?" Arthur stared past the glass. "Because every year I waited made it harder to be the first one to reach out." Noah frowned. "That's silly." Arthur looked back at him. Noah shrugged. "If somebody falls in a hole, you don't wait until they climb out before you throw them a rope." For a long moment, nobody spoke. Later that day, Arthur asked quietly, "Do you believe people can change?" Elena was rinsing a spoon at the sink. "I believe people can regret," she said. "Change costs more." Arthur nodded slowly. "Then maybe I'm finally ready to pay." Just as Arthur's health began improving, the visitors returned. His nephew Graham arrived first in an expensive suit and practiced concern. "We were all so worried," he said, placing imported fruit by the bed. Arthur looked at him. "Where were you when they thought I'd die?" Graham's expression flickered. "We didn't want to overwhelm you." The next day came Arthur's sister Vivian, elegance and staged sorrow. She kissed his forehead, praised his strength, and within minutes began asking whether his legal affairs were properly updated in case of future complications. Then came old business associates, distant relatives, friends who had been too busy to visit a dying man, but suddenly available the moment he looked less likely to disappear. The room that had once been empty became crowded, but not with love, with appetite. Noah noticed it first. He leaned close while the adults talked in polished voices by the window and whispered, "How come everybody found you right when you stopped looking dead?" Arthur turned his eyes toward them and realized something terrible. A billionaire recovering was much more complicated than a billionaire dying. From that point on, Arthur started watching instead of trusting. He heard Graham taking calls about stock shifts if the old man relapses. He saw Vivian asking Samuel Pierce, his longtime attorney, strange questions about beneficiaries, trustees, and timelines. He noticed the fake tears, the careful hand touches, the concerned tones that never once reached warmth. And the more time he spent with Noah, the harder it became not to see it. One afternoon, Graham was speaking about preserving the family legacy, while Noah quietly built a tiny tower from sugar packets on the side table. Arthur interrupted. "Which family?" Graham blinked. "Yours, of course." Arthur glanced at Noah, then at Elena, then back at Graham. "Interesting," he said, "because the only people in this room who care whether I'm frightened, tired, or lonely are 7 years old and earning hourly wages." The silence that followed was deliciously uncomfortable. Later, Vivian cornered Elena in the hallway. "I don't know what game you think you're playing," she said coldly, "but taking advantage of a vulnerable man is not going to end well for you." Before Elena could answer, Arthur's voice came from inside the room. "If anyone is taking advantage of me, Vivian, it certainly isn't the woman raising a child with more decency than this entire family combined." Vivian turned pale. Elena turned toward the doorway, shocked. Arthur had spent years protecting appearances. Now, stripped down by illness and regret, he no longer seemed interested in them. That evening, after the visitors were gone, Samuel stayed behind. Arthur looked tired, but his eyes were clearer than they had been in years. "Find Lily," he said. Samuel hesitated. "We tried." "Try harder." Samuel took off his glasses. "There's something you should have known years ago." Arthur's heart gave one heavy, painful beat. "Daniel Cross died in a car accident in Ohio 4 years ago," Samuel said. Lily survived. After that, records became difficult to trace. I attempted to bring it to your attention at the time, but Vivian instructed staff not to disturb your merger meetings overseas unless there was legal exposure. Arthur stared at him. My daughter lost her husband, he said slowly. And I wasn't told because it was inconvenient? Samuel didn't defend anyone. I should have disobeyed. Arthur looked away, tears gathering again. Beside him, Noah, who understood almost none of the details, quietly placed his hand on Arthur's arm. That tiny hand said more than every polished apology Arthur had received from adults in years. When Elena got home that night, Noah had fallen asleep over a family tree worksheet at the kitchen table. One blank line stared up at her beneath the word, grandfather. Elena stood there a long time. Then she took Lily's letter from the box and finally opened it. Her hands shook as she read. If Arthur ever becomes the kind of man who can love Noah without trying to own him, tell him the truth. Tell him Noah is his grandson. I never kept our son from him out of revenge. I kept him safe until I believed love would matter more to Arthur than inheritance. Elena cried soundlessly in the dark kitchen because she knew the moment was coming. And once the truth was spoken, none of their lives would ever fit back into the old shape. The next afternoon, Noah brought a harmonica. He proudly told Arthur he wanted to learn because his dad used to play. Arthur looked up sharply. Your father played music? Mom says he made pancakes shaped like animals and played songs that made the whole apartment feel less broke. Arthur went very still. Because Margaret had once described Daniel almost the same way after secretly meeting him for coffee. He doesn't make a room feel richer, she had told Arthur. He makes it feel less afraid. Arthur had dismissed it back then. Now he felt the memory cut straight through him. What was his full name? He asked Elena after Noah ran into the hallway. She looked at him for a long second. Daniel Cross. Arthur closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were full of understanding. You knew. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Elena reached into her bag and pulled out the letter. Because Lily asked me not to unless I knew you had changed. Arthur took the envelope with trembling hands. He read slowly. Then again. By the time he reached the line that revealed Noah was Lily's boy, his grandson, his shoulders were shaking too hard to stay still. He's hers, Arthur whispered. My God, he's Lily's boy. Did she suffer? He asked after a long time. Elena's eyes filled. Yes, but not because she stopped loving you. She never did. Arthur bent forward and sobbed into the letter. When Noah returned and saw both adults crying, his little face tightened with worry. Did something bad happen? Arthur opened his arms without thinking. Something important happened. Noah climbed carefully onto the edge of the bed. Arthur placed one trembling hand on the back of the boy's head. He didn't reveal everything at once. Truth that big needed gentleness. So he only asked, would it be okay if I told you something very important soon? Something about your family? Noah looked at his mother first. Elena nodded through tears. Then Noah looked back at Arthur. Is it scary important? Arthur gave a broken smile. I hope it's beautiful important. Noah thought for a moment. Okay, but Mom has to stay. Arthur looked at Elena. She stays, he said softly. Always. The next few days felt like a storm building behind glass. Arthur ordered every old file reopened. DNA tests, medical histories, old correspondence. Hidden records, intercepted letters, buried reports. Every truth that surfaced revealed another betrayal. Letters from Lily had been withheld. Information about Daniel's death had been buried. Updates had been redirected. Arthur's grief had been managed like a business inconvenience by people who feared losing their place in his fortune. But for the first time in his life, Arthur did not respond with rage first. He responded with clarity. Because Noah kept interrupting his anger with innocence. The boy wanted to learn checkers, wanted Arthur to tell stories about being poor in Brooklyn, wanted to know if rich men had nightmares too, wanted to know if growing old made your heart wiser or just slower. Arthur told him about stealing peaches as a boy in Brooklyn, about sleeping in a room so small he could touch both walls, about watching his mother mend clothes by a cracked window. "So you weren't always rich?" Arthur laughed softly. "No, I was just always afraid." Noah nodded like that made perfect sense, because children often understand adults better than adults understand themselves. On Sunday morning, Arthur finally told him. The room was quiet, bright, gentle. Elena sat close enough to hold Noah if he needed it. Samuel stood by the window, respectfully silent. Arthur looked at the little boy and said, "Do you remember when you told me, 'Lost is not the same as gone'?" Noah nodded. "You were right. A long time ago, I lost my daughter because I was too proud to go after her. Her name was Lily." Noah listened carefully. "Your father was Daniel Cross," Arthur swallowed. "And your mother was Lily." The little boy blinked. He looked at Elena, then back at Arthur. Then his face changed slowly as understanding arrived. "So, you're my grandpa?" Arthur nodded, tears already spilling. "I waited because your mom asked me to," Elena whispered. "She wanted to be sure he would love you the right way." Noah looked at Arthur for a long moment. Then he asked the question that decided everything. "Are you ready?" Arthur's voice broke. "More ready than I have ever been for anything in my entire life." Noah studied him 1 second longer. Then he climbed off the chair and wrapped his arms around Arthur's neck. Arthur held him with the terrified reverence of a man who knew exactly how much it cost to receive a second chance. The fallout came quickly. Graham stormed in first, furious that Arthur was rewriting everything over a cleaning lady and some random child. Arthur, now strong enough to stand with a cane, looked at him with deadly calm. "That random child is my grandson." Vivian arrived next with tears, accusations, warnings, and suggestions about manipulation. Arthur let her finish. Then he placed Lily's letter on the table between them. "You buried my daughter from me when she needed me most," he said. "You hid the truth because you were more afraid of losing influence than ashamed of what you were doing. You do not get to speak to me about family again." He did not scream. He did not take revenge for pleasure. He simply removed access, titles, control. Graham was cut out of succession planning after recordings revealed him discussing Arthur's death like a financial event. Vivian lost her position in the family foundation after forensic audits found money going where it never should have gone. Old friends lost their loans. Business partners lost their leverage. Arthur wasn't interested in revenge. He wanted truth aligned with consequence. Nothing more, nothing less. Then came the decision no one expected. Arthur restructured his entire estate. Not in the way the family feared. He created the Lily Cross Foundation for Arts, Music, and Family Healing, in honor of the daughter he had failed while she was alive. He created protected trusts for Noah's education, health, and future, carefully structured so no greedy relative could ever turn the boy into a target. He restored pensions and bonuses for longtime staff who had been invisible for years. He made major gifts to the hospital family shelter and music programs Daniel would have loved. And then, he made Elena an offer that left the whole room speechless. He bought a brownstone near Noah's school and placed it in a trust under her control. Not as charity, not as ownership, as security, as gratitude, as recognition. "I'm not buying a place in this family," Arthur told her. "If I have one, it will be because you let me earn it. But Noah deserves safety, and you deserve rest. And if I say no, then I spend the rest of my life being grateful anyway." That was the moment she believed he had changed, not because he gave money away, because he no longer used it like power. Arthur left the hospital weeks later to applause from nurses who had watched a lonely man become a grandfather in real time. Recovery was not a miracle. It was work. Physical therapy, medication, grief, paperwork, truth. Learning how to live in a house that no longer echoed. But this time, Arthur did not heal alone. Noah filled his home with toy cars, drawings, laughter, sticky fingerprints, and relentless questions. Elena filled it with honesty. Arthur attended school plays and sat on tiny folding chairs without once checking his phone. He took terrible beginner piano lessons because Noah wanted to learn songs Daniel used to play. He burned pancakes and got laughed at for it. He listened when Elena corrected him. Really listened. Sometimes late at night, Arthur still woke from dreams of Lily. 17, 25, laughing, crying, walking away. On those nights, Elena would be in the kitchen making tea, because grief kept odd hours for both of them. And they would talk about Lily. How she painted barefoot. How she hated over-designed flowers. How she laughed too loud in quiet rooms. How she loved fully, even when it hurt her. Arthur listened like a starving man finally allowed to eat. He could never get back the lost years. But he could make the years ahead worthy of her. In the spring, Arthur took Elena and Noah to Ohio, to the cemetery where Lily and Daniel rested side by side. He carried wildflowers because Elena said Lily always preferred things that looked alive, not arranged. Arthur knelt before Lily's grave and placed one shaking hand against her name. "I came too late," he whispered, "but I came." Noah crouched down beside him and said softly, "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. I found Grandpa. He was really lonely and kind of grumpy, but he's getting better." Arthur laughed through tears. Noah took out his harmonica and played 4 shaky notes into the wind. "I'm learning," he added proudly. "Still bad, though." Elena covered her mouth and cried openly. Arthur bowed his head. For the first time, his grief did not feel like punishment alone. It felt like love refusing to disappear. By summer, the Lily Cross Foundation opened its first community house in Brooklyn. Art rooms, music lessons, grief counselors, family meal nights, scholarships, and a performance room named after Daniel. Reporters wanted Arthur's name on the building. He refused. "The most important work of my life," he said, "began the day I stopped making everything about me." But Arthur protected Noah from public spectacle. No magazine covers, no tearful interviews using the child as proof of redemption. No polished family narrative for press consumption. Arthur had finally learned that love is not content. It is care. Real emotional justice unfolded quietly after that. Staff members who had served the family for decades were finally seen. Samuel retired proud instead of merely paid. Vivian received forgiveness without access. Graham received consequences without drama. Arthur no longer measured victory by humiliation. He measured it by peace. And peace began showing up in small ways. Noah racing down hallways in socks. Elena laughing at breakfast. Music drifting from the piano. A kitchen full of burnt pancakes and second chances. That fall, Arthur took them to the beach house Margaret had loved, and he had avoided ever since she died. For years it had sat untouched, like grief locked behind a front door. This time, Arthur opened it himself. Dust floated in the late sunlight. The ocean glowed beyond the windows. On the refrigerator, Arthur found an old recipe card in Margaret's handwriting. Pancakes for Lily, extra vanilla. He sat down at the kitchen table and held the card like it might still be warm. She kept what mattered small enough to use every day, Arthur said. Maybe that's the lesson, Elena answered. Love is supposed to be usable, not impressive. The next morning they made the pancakes together. Noah ruined the first batch. Arthur ruined the second. Elena saved the third. And for the first time in decades, the beach house smelled less like memory and more like life. That evening, as the sun lowered itself into the ocean, Noah insisted they bury a time capsule in the sand. He filled an old tin with a shell, a crayon drawing of the three of them, a broken piano key, and a note he made Arthur write, because Grandpa's handwriting looked important. Arthur wrote exactly what Noah dictated. We found each other late, but not too late. Then Noah added one line of his own in crooked little letters. Love is when you stay. They buried the tin together and stood there watching the waves breathe in and out. Arthur slipped his hand into Noah's. The child squeezed back automatically. No ceremony, no fear. No idea that every time he did that, he healed wounds older than himself. Behind them, the beach house windows glowed warm. Inside, Elena was setting the table. Arthur looked at that light, then at the ocean, then at the little boy beside him, and he finally understood. The first real visitor who came to him when death was closest had not arrived with lawyers, flowers, or carefully polished concern. He came with bright sneakers, a fearless heart, and one innocent question. Sir, are you lonely? Arthur spent the rest of his life answering that question differently. Not with money, not with legacy, not with control, but with presence, with softness, with gratitude, with love given before it was too late. Because in the end, the greatest wealth in life is not money. It is being genuinely loved when you have nothing left to offer. If this story touched your heart, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still needs to remember what real wealth truly means.